Welcome one and all. The 11th day of the 10th month. You got that one right. Tevet 5779, part 2. The best kept Jewish secret of the 8th, 9th, and 10th of Tevet. As is our motto, we will, in a couple of minutes, we will sum up the what we spoke about last week. So even if you didn't see last week, you're okay. You're good to go. So here we go. Last week we posed 6 questions. Question number 1: our sages connect 2 events. One is the kidnapping and rape of Dinah in the city of Shechem, and the war that ensued, the vengeance by her brothers Shimon and Levi and other brothers against the inhabitants of Shechem, Nablus, and Hanukkah. One in the world is the connection between 2 events that are 11 or 1200 years apart. Number 2, all Jewish holidays stick to 1 month, except for Hanukkah. Hanukkah begins in the month of Kislev, and it continues in the month of Tevet. Why is there a need to have a holiday in 2 months? Duration of 2 months. Question number 3. The Jewish people, the sages compare the Jewish people to a dove in the time of the Greeks, in the time of Hanukkah. What's the connection between a dove and the Jewish people? Question number 4. When we're speaking about a dove, did our sages mean to compare the Jewish people to any dove, or the dove of Noach? When he perceived that the flood was over, he sends a dove from the ark to see if the water had receded, and he came back, the dove came back with a olive branch in its peak. So the sages connect us not only to a dove, but also to the olive branch in the peak of the dove. Question number 5. Question number 5. Is there a connection between Hanukkah and the 8th day of Tevet? 8th day of Tevet, the Torah, 5 books of Moses, was translated by 72 sages, translated into the Greek language, and that became a fast day, which is stated in the Code of Jewish Law 580. Is there a connection between the 2 events? Besides that Torah was translated into Greek, I get it, and the Jews were fighting the Greeks. Okay, but besides for that, is there something much more deeper involved between the 2 events? This was a tremendous tragedy for the Jewish people. It's written in a few places, in a few tractates, that this day that the Torah was translated, 3 days of darkness came down to the world. The entire world was encompassed with darkness, which is pretty serious. And it was a day that was difficult, as harsh as when the Jewish people worshipped the golden calf in time of the desert after the exodus of Egypt. Also, comparing it to the golden calf, we know that most punishments we paid the price already, except for there's 1 or 2 events that we're still paying the price, and one of them happens to be the golden calf. Every punishment that we receive, even God forbid today, there's some percentage, 0.00 point something, that we are receiving a punishment instead of being annihilated during the time that we worship the golden calf. So God, so to speak, he took a gigantic rock, instead of throwing it to us in one shot, which would kill, God forbid, a person, so he takes a pebble at a time. It still hurts, but it's only a pebble that's being thrown our way. The 9th of The 9th of Tevet is also a fast. Is there a connection between Hanukkah and the 9th of Tevet? The 9th of Tevet, there's two opinions that were brought down in the Code of Jewish Law, 580. One opinion is that the JC, may his name be erased, also known as Yeshu, which means the same in Hebrew. He was born on that day. And so I'm sure many of you know that Tevet usually spells December around December 25th. It's a whole subject, was he really born then or not? There's a lot of stuff that shows that he was not born during this time, but that's for another class. The second opinion is that Ezra and Nehemiah were passed away. Is there a connection between Hanukkah and these events? Last but not least, we have, of course, the public fast. The two fasts that I just mentioned, 8th and 9th, those are not mandatory fasts. Those are voluntary fasts. You don't have to. Only people that want to accept upon themselves. So, of course, the 10th day, is there a connection between the Hanukkah and the 10th day of Tevet? Last but not least, we have a concept. If you look up in your Webster dictionary, you will see there's a concept called New Israel. According to Webster's dictionary, it says that this was a concept that was either created by the church or by Christians, that they happen to be, I don't know if you've heard the news, but they are the New Israel. So the Jewish people have Young Israel, the Jewish people have Yisrael Saba, the Old Israel, but now there's the New Israel. Ironically, if you think about it, this is pretty amazing that, you know, isn't that disgusting that as we're supposed to buy into this, we're supposed to believe this joke that the Christians or the church, they are the New Israel, as if God has forsaken his people, God forbid. But interesting enough, there is this anti-Semitic fund. It's called the New Israel Fund. Isn't it interesting that of all names that they could have picked, well, they hit the church or they hit the Christian New Israel Fund. Yeah. I want to tell you something. I looked up the New Israel Fund, and you know, they're on the hit list of a lot of people here in Israel. Understandable, they're anti-Semitic, and they support a lot of leftists and a lot of anti-Jewish and anti-religious, anything anti-Israel groups. Anyways, I saw an article on an Israeli website news that was giving a list of all these organizations that are anti-Israel and anti-Semitic that the New Israel Fund supports. So I said, wow, this is great. Unfortunately, I don't have the list because of the fact that this Israeli website is so immodest, which is a nice word, that I had to just oh my God, I just X'd it. And I couldn't even ask my wife, can you go on for my wife? Because it's just so disgusting. So I'm sorry that I don't have the list of the New Israel Fund and who they support. Really disgusting. Anyways, so folks, those are our big 6 questions. Last but not least, not a question, but last week, we're just summarizing what we did last week. Last but not least, we took the first question, a connection between the event in Nablus, Shechem, Shimon and Levi, and the kidnapping and rape of Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. Our sages compare it to the events of Hanukkah. We said stage number 1, we have that, that we see that Jacob was lackadaisical in his observance. He had an oath that he had taken upon himself when he ran away, when he was coerced to run away from his brother Esav. He accepted upon himself an oath that when he returns to the city of Beit El, he would once again erect a altar to give a thanksgiving sacrifice to God, and also to pour oil, special oil, on this altar. So when it came to this service of God, of thanksgiving to God, Jacob took his time. He was lax. So therefore, he was punished. He was punished by the fact that his daughter was taken and raped. Of course, Dinah also had a connection between it. It wasn't just like, what's Dinah? Why does Dinah have to pay the price for her father? It doesn't work like that. Everybody has their own account. Jacob suffered the suffering of his daughter because he had something lacking. Dinah herself was lacking in certain areas, therefore she herself. Everyone pays their own way. Okay, so on the other side, that was during the time, that was the story of Dinah and Jacob and the brothers. Take it now to Hanukkah. We have the fact that according to the Bach writes in the Code of Jewish Law, he writes there that the reason why the Jewish people suffered decrees against religion, against Judaism, against the Torah during the time of Hanukkah was the fact that they were lax in the service of the temple, of the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem. Whether they were the Kohanim, the priests, or the Levites, the Leviim, they became lax. And therefore, when you're lackadaisical, so therefore you have to pay the price. So we have according to Maimonides, the major decree was against women. If you look at all the decrees, the majority of them were towards women. And we spoke about which ones. The top one, of course, is that any Jewish bride that was going to get married, she was coerced to have relations first with various officials of the Greek government. So we have two equal parts, Dinah and Jacob and the brothers, and the same problem was prevalent at the time of Hanukkah. Okay, the result, step number two, the result was that Dinah was kidnapped and raped. Result in Hanukkah, step number two, was that Jewish women were targeted with all kinds of decrees against them. That's what we mentioned. One more step. Step number 3. Last week we discussed what was going on in the heads of the inhabitants of Nablus, of Shechem. What was the idea behind the kidnapping and the agreement that they made to give their daughters to the Jewish people and receive Jewish women on their side? What was behind the agreement? We saw in various sources that it was very simple. The people of Shechem were interested in assimilating the Jewish people. They were interested in assimilating the Jewish people, and the best way to do it, is usually through women. Women, especially in Judaism, women represent strength, courage, fighting, standing up, and not capitulating. More so than men. For example, Rav Yaakov Emden, he writes in one of his books, for example, in time that the Jewish people were tossed out of Spain, there were many, many Jewish men that decided to, at least on the outside, become Christians. However, he writes that women and children gave up their lives. They were playing games over here. If you look in major Jewish holidays, there's always women there that are at the forefront of the fight. Very interesting. If you look in the city of Hebron, it was led by women. Women took over the Hadassah hospital. It was done by women. If you look today in the land of Israel movement, you'll see the leader is Daniela Weiss, a woman. You look at Purim, you see Queen Esther. You look at Hanukkah, there's many, many women behind it. So it's very interesting that in order to the Gentiles understood that in order to assimilate the Jewish people and to make sure that there would be no differences between us, there's no such thing as chosen. We're all the same. We're people. We're human beings. We're humanists. Let's just become one people. And if you look in the words, it's tremendous. The people of Shechem, the inhabitants of Shechem, they use twice in 2 verses. The Torah is very careful on its words, but it uses the words. The inhabitants use the words, let us become one nation. That's the idea. And in order to assimilate the Jewish people, who do you hit? You have to hit the women. If you're able to overcome the women, then you've destroyed the Jewish people. That's usually the way it works. Now think about this. In the time of Egypt, the first decree against the Jewish people, who was it against? Who did they target? It's amazing that the first decree was targeted. The women were targeted in more than one ways. Number one, all women had to, if they had a firstborn, they would have to if they had a baby, if they had a baby boy, they would have to kill that boy. So the Egyptians, Pharaoh, understood this concept that if you want to destroy the Jewish people, you first have to destroy the backbone of the Jewish people. The backbone of the Jewish people are the women. So therefore, his first decree is against women. Number 2, he calls in Shifra and Puah, and it says in the Tractate of Sotah that it wasn't just a business deal where he tells these 2 midwives, listen, if you see it's a boy, kill them. If it's a girl, you're allowed to allow them to live. But he also tried sexually to abuse these 2 women, Shifra and Puah. So they understood, the nations of the world understood this point throughout history, that in order to conquer the Jewish people, the first target has to be the women of the Jewish people, because they're the hardcore. They're the backbone of the Jewish people. So that's exactly was the plan of the inhabitants of Shechem. Take it on the other side. In the times of Hanukkah, what happened after we were lax in the service of the temple, of the Beit HaMikdash? Then we had decrees against women. Once again, what were the decrees? The decrees were to try to assimilate, to assimilate the Jewish people. The major target was to go via the women. And therefore the majority of decrees were against women in order to assimilate. Once we are able to assimilate and have relations in more than one way with these Jewish women, then that's all, folks. That's all, folks, for the Jewish people. Okay, that is a quick summary of last week, or sort of quick. Okay, now we're moving on. There's an amazing point that most of us are not aware of, and you're going to hear it, and it's important to remember this. Surrounding the subject of Dinah being raped and abused in the city of Shechem, and the being avenged by her brothers, Shimon and Levi, leading the charge. If you look at the events, either before or after the event in Shechem, it's an amazing concept. Listen to this. Number 1, in Genesis, we're talking 33:20. It says the following. This is right before the portion of what happens to Dinah. Listen to this. Jacob, he sets up an altar there and proclaimed, God, the God of Israel. Okay, so Jacob is in the city of Shechem. Once again, his oath was to go back to the city of Beit El. Now he's in the city of Shechem. He hasn't reached Beit El yet. But he's in the city of Shechem. He erects an altar there. And he calls the altar Israel. Well, that's an amazing. We haven't heard that name used. If you look at all the... If you look at all the 8 portions up until now, we never use the word, the terminology Israel. These are the first times. So that's number 1. Before that, we have in Genesis 32, 24, 25, and 26, we have an amazing story how Jacob forgets some kind of jugs or jars on the east side of the Jordan River, and he leaves his family on the west side, what they call today the west bank of the Jordan, and he goes back alone. There he fights with the angel of Esav, and the angel of Esav then calls him, 32 verse 29, your name will no longer be Jacob but Israel, for you have striven with the divine and with men and have overcome. Time number 2. So this is right before the event that took place with the kidnapping and rape of Dinah. So time number 2, we have the name Israel. Within the event itself, the sons come to Jacob and they say, listen, in chapter 34, verse 7, it says the following. Jacob's sons arrived from the field when they heard the men were distressed and were fired deeply with indignation, for he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying, not like telling a lie, but having relations with a daughter of Jacob. Such a thing may not be done. The 3rd time that the name of Israel, which has not been heard in the first 8 portions of Genesis, and all of a sudden, time number 3, after the victory against the inhabitants of Shechem, we have Jacob finally going to Beit El to observe his oath that he had taken and set up the altar and pour upon it oil. And then then God comes up to him, and God tells him that your name will no longer be. In 35:10, your name is Jacob. Your name shall not always be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. Thus he called his name Israel. Dear friends, 4 times. All these are encompassing the event that took place of the raping and vengeance that took place in the city of Shechem, of Dinah, and the vengeance by your brothers. What in the world is going on here? So, very simple. We said, on one hand, the inhabitants of Shechem, the idea was to assimilate the Jewish people, becoming one nation. In other words, their goal was to uproot the name of Israel, That's why we have 4 times to understand what is going on here, that the whole fight, the whole battle, the whole war is trying to uproot the name of Israel. And the battle is being fought not necessarily only through fighting, it's also through mingling, it's also through trying to erase differences, to join, to coexist with the Jewish people, as that was the idea. So there are two ways to uproot the name of Israel. You could try to battle and destroy the Jewish people, or you could try to spiritually destroy the Jewish people by beginning relations, by cudzing up and coming close with the Jewish people. This is the second way to uproot the name of Israel, which is an amazing point. Now, I'm going to say an amazing thing. It just hit me yesterday. It just hit me yesterday. And I ain't going to tell you how old I am, so it took me some years to get to this. But there's an amazing point. There's an amazing point. We'll ask a question. What in the world was going on with the Jewish people? Jewish people are sleeping for 3.8 years. You got it. There are decrees against the Jewish women. There are decrees against the Torah. What in the world is happening with the Jewish people? Why is there no response? Why is there no revolt going on? Why are they taking it sitting down? This is happening in the land of Israel. It's not in Siberia. It's not happening in somewhere in Europe and somewhere in North Africa. This is happening in our home. This is our backyard. This is our home court. I saw an unbelievable take on this in a book called Yerach Lemoadim by Rav Elshin. He brings up this amazing point. This is not a simple issue. When there was a decree against the Jewish women, that any Jewish woman that wanted to get married would first have to be abused sexually by Greek government officials. There was a dispute amongst the sages. What is the correct action here? We know on one hand, if a Gentile comes up to a Jew and on the Sabbath and says, "Hey man, can you cook me up some beans? I'm really hungry." Listen, it's my Sabbath here. I can't cook. We're not allowed to cook. I'm Jewish. Don't you see this beanie on my head? We're Jewish. And then he pulls out a knife. He pulls out a gun. He says, "Man, I'm hungry. I don't care about your Sabbath." What's the law? The law, of course, is that because of the fact that he's doing it in order to enjoy himself, he couldn't care less if it was Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. He wants to eat. He doesn't care about the Sabbath. So when there's a concept, when the Gentile or Gentiles are doing it only for pleasure, then of course a Jew has to guard his life, his or her life, and they should do the sin. Now, we know the story of Purim. We have Queen Esther. She's in the palace. She's having relations against her will with the king, Achashverosh. Why didn't she give up her life? Question, right? One of the reasons is that she was coerced, and he was doing it not against the Jewish religion, not in order to mess up the Jews and to get at the Jews. He was doing it for his pleasure. So therefore, according to most opinion, there was no need in this case for Queen Esther to sacrifice her life. Okay, that's just in parentheses. So let's move it back. So Rav Elshin says an amazing point. There was a great dispute going on for 3.5 years, 3.8 years. Is this decree that women must be abused and have relations with these Greeks? Is this a decree that women have to give their lives, instead take their own lives, or rather be killed than have relations with these people? Yes or no? There are certain opinions in halacha For example, Nachmanides. Nachmanides writes that in such a situation, person does not have to give up his or her life because it's not a decree against the religion. There were other people, just like there are other halachic Jewish law authorities that looked at it totally different. That this was a decree against the Jewish people. This was an attempt to uproot the name Israel from the Jewish people. This was a decree against the Jewish people. Of course, they're enjoying themselves at the same time. But the major force behind their decision to do these decrees was against the religion, against the Torah, against the commandments. This is an amazing thing. Now listen to this. After you heard that, okay, Mike, I don't want you to choke on whichever you're eating over there. And I see you haven't eaten since the fast ended for you just now, I guess. Okay, folks, listen to this. This just came to me. God gave me this gift. This gave me this gift yesterday. Listen to the conversation between Jacob and his sons. This is an amazing light. Jacob hears, this is 34:5, Jacob hears that his daughter Dinah was defiled. Okay, once again, his daughter, what has been defiled here? Notice, not necessarily, number one, God's name or the Jewish people. It's his daughter. It's something that is a private issue here. So then it's not only then. The sons, however, when they come from the field, they say the finally. They were fired deeply with indignation, for he'd committed an outrage in Israel. The sons understand this event in a totally different light. This is not a girl. This is not my sister. This is not... It is my sister, but the major issue here is that an outrage has been committed against Israel, against the people of Israel, against the God of Israel. That's how they understood the situation. And therefore, we have totally different paths in the way that they wanted to work things out. So too, we see an amazing thing. So too we see in Hanukkah, there was a dispute. Was this a pleasure decree, getting their laughs and enjoying themselves, or was it an attempt to uproot the name of Israel? Now, here's an amazing thing. It says in Rav Elshin's book on page 340, Yerach Lemoadim, says the following point. An amazing concept here. He says if you look at the prayer that we say on Purim compared to the prayer that we say on Hanukkah, you will see there's a tremendous difference between the prayers. And he brings the following. His first question was, how come the Greeks made a decree against the Jewish people that on the horn of the ox, they would have to engrave in the horn of the ox, we have no connection, we have no share with the God of Israel. Why didn't they just put engrave on the horn of the ox, we have no share share in God. Why do they use the word? Why did they force us to use the word Israel? Number two, when you look at the prayer Al Anisim in the Amidah benediction, you will see there that it says that the Greeks made decrees against the Jewish people. Against the Jewish people. Why didn't it just say against the people? Why does it use the word Israel? The Greeks are constantly forcing the Jewish people to use the word Israel. Not only that, he writes, it doesn't say that in the days of Purim. In the days of Purim, it does not use the term Israel at all. And number two, it says the following: in the days of Mordechai and Esther in the town of Shushan Abiram Purim, it just says that the evil Haman stood against the people. So in the days of Esther and Mordechai, where's the word Israel? And then at the end of the same prayer, on Hanukkah, it says, your children came and lit and sanctified and purified the temple and lit the candles. It does not, the same expression does not appear in the time of Purim. So he comes up with an amazing concept. Why are the Greeks always so involved with the name Israel? Because he writes this amazing. You thought that the new Israel concept, one of our questions, the new Israel are the Christians or the church? They stole it, like they stole most of their religion. They stole it from the Jews. They stole this also. This is a Greek. The Greeks looked at themselves as the new Israel. That's who they were. They were the new Israel. Which is amazing. So they're taking the place, they are switching the Jewish people. The Jewish people used to be the people of Israel, God's people. But now that we've assimilated them, now that we have their women, etc., and we have relations with them, now we are the new Israel. We are the new Israel. And he goes on, says the following: usually in history, the goal of the nations of the world was to destroy the Jewish people, was just to destroy them. But with the Greeks, it was a whole different ballgame. They wanted not to destroy the Jewish people. They're happy to live with the Jewish people. What they wanted to do was to destroy the spirituality, to destroy the chosenness, to destroy the godliness. They wanted to accept certain concepts of the Jewish Torah, but, with no strings attached. Whatever they accepted, whatever they understood, could feel, can touch with their mind, that was fine to accept. But a concept that there are commandments that are beyond logic and beyond a person's IQ and understanding, no way. A chosen people are different, no way. That they were not willing to. So therefore, they accepted upon themselves the name, we are the new Israel. Now that they have the Torah 100 years before the story, approximately 106 years before the story of Hanukkah, the Torah was translated into Greek. So for 106 years, they're already going with this Torah that they have and proving, quote unquote, how they are the new Israel, proving from various verses that they have in front of them how they are the new Israel. So they did not want to destroy the Jewish body. They were happy to keep the Jews. They appreciated wisdom, and they knew that the Jews had the wisdom. That's why they wanted the Jewish wisdom, the Jewish Torah. They wanted to destroy the special, the uniqueness, the isolation of the Jew. So that's the difference between this story of Hanukkah and other stories. Now, we see an amazing, in order to understand the assimilation of the Jewish people here. Right before Jacob and his children go into the city of Nablus of Shechem, and Dinah is kidnapped there, right before that, Jacob has a tremendous battle with the angel of Esav, his brother. And the battle goes for all night until dawn. At dawn, the battle we thought is over, but right at that moment when we thought the battle is over at dawn, the angel is, even though the angel was defeated, he's still able to bring a certain level of defeat to the Jewish people by hitting the thigh of Jacob. Jacob would be there limping from that, and he hits him in the thigh. Why didn't he hit him in the arm? Why didn't he hit him between his nose? Why didn't he hit him in the head? If the Torah tells us where the angel was able to affect Jacob, there's a tremendous lesson to be taught here. Now, he hits him, the angel of Esav hits Jacob in the thigh area. What does that mean? We know that, for example, in this week's portion, Vayechi, when Jacob wants to have Joseph swear that he will bury him when Jacob passes away, Jacob wants to be buried in the land of Israel, in the city of Hebron. So he says, there was no Torah. Today, if you want to make an oath, you take a Torah, the Holy Scrolls. But then there was yet no Holy Torah. So the only thing that they could swear on, the commandment, was of course the circumcision. Where is the circumcision? Is in the area of the thigh. That is where the angel of Esav was able to do damage. Now, what does this mean? So let's look. Unbelievable stuff. Hold on. Put on your seatbelts. We're going for a ride over here. So, Jacob goes back, right? He meets up with this angel because he left his family on the west side of the Jordan River. He goes back, and he's going back for a jug. What's in the jug? So the Tosfot and other sages, they tell us, very interesting, that Yaakov, in the portion of Vayishlach, it says that he went back livado. Now you could read the word livado, or you could read it likado, right? It's almost the same letters. Vet and kaf, you could switch them. So he went back for his jug. What was in the jug? In the jug, so the Tosfot and other sages tell us that there was oil. There was oil there. Why is Jacob endangering himself going back for a jar of oil? This was no regular oil. So let's take it back one step. We have at the time that Jacob is running away from his brother, this was 36 years before. Right now, he's about to face his brother. So we're talking about 36 years before that, when he steals the blessings from his brother Esav. So what happens then? So Jacob's in the city of Beit El. He has a dream there. And there he gets up and he gets into this dream, and all of a sudden, you know who comes by? His nephew, Eliphaz. Hey, you know what's happening? High five there. Today they have like the body, what is it called? They go into the bodies one into another. Maybe it's a body five. I don't know what it's called today. But anyways, and Jacob says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "You're not going to believe this, Uncle Jacob, but I was sent by my father to kill you." "What? You're going to kill me? You're my nephew. You're my favorite nephew, Eliphaz." "Oh, I really don't want to kill you. I really like you, Uncle Jacob. But you know, in our family of Esav, we have tremendous respect for our parents. And my father gave me this commandment, so I must observe this commandment." "No, time out," Jacob says. "Listen, it says in the Torah that there are 4 types of people that are considered to be dead. Even though they're alive, they're considered to be dead. One of them is a poor person. You'll take my money, everything that belongs to me, and I'll be considered to be dead because I will be poor. I don't have my money. I don't have my assets. I don't have my credit cards. I don't have my ATM." So Eliphaz says, "Well, it's a great idea over here." He takes everything, including his clothes. Anyways, long story, how Jacob's able to get clothes. He's able to get clothes. God comes up to him. He has nothing left, and he gives he gives Jacob a jar of miraculous oil. Okay, comes down. Imagine that. You know, Eliphaz took everything that he owned, and now he has this oil at his disposal. Now, this oil was special, because it would always, after Jacob would use it, it would always refill. You know, I wish they had cars. Yeah, when you had to, instead of refilling all the time, it would do it by itself, instead of having to pay all this money for the gas. But anyways, so Jacob understood that this oil is not regular oil. This is special oil. In fact, our sages tell us that this oil was the oil at the time of Hanukkah. Imagine that connection here. And we're going to get there, slowly but surely. So, Jacob leaves his family on the west side of the Jordan River. He goes to the east side to retrieve that tremendous, miraculous jug that he used 36 years ago, when he was running away from his brother. Okay, now, listen to this. Just a second. Right when you need that page. Ooh. Okay, so what was going down over here? So Jacob goes back and he has this fight. He has this fight with the angel. Now, the angel hits him, as we said, in the thigh, in the area of the circumcision. Why is that? Why did it happen like that? Okay, so we have our first source is the book Edut B'Yosef, page 287. It says the following: what part of Jacob's body was affected, injured? And he says straight out there, we're talking about the place of circumcision. And the Torah uses very clean language. It did not want to say, did not want to use the word, the place of the circumcision. And therefore it tells us that he was injured in the thigh area. We're supposed to deduct from this that, in the thigh area, it wasn't necessarily the thigh. It happened to be where the circumcision takes place. What was going on here? The angel understood that in order to defeat Jacob, the way to defeat Jacob was by assimilation. Why is that? Because the circumcision area represents relations. And he understood, the angel understood, that in order to defeat the Jewish people, they would have to, the nations of the world would have to assimilate us first by friendly relations, etc. And then once we would have friendly relations, the relations would turn also into sexual relations. That was the idea here. Now, in another book, listen to this, in a book called Magid Chadashot on page 166, he says an unbelievable concept. Remember this all your life. He says what was going on between this, there was a battle royal going on there between Jacob and the angel of Esav. What was going on? All night long they're fighting and Jacob is victorious. What happened all of a sudden at dawn? Why was Jacob injured at dawn? He was victorious for the first 10 rounds all night. So listen to this explanation and remember it always. He says the following, that the entire night represents nations of the world that come up against the Jewish people and make spiritual and religious decrees against the commandments, against the Torah. Once the Jewish people are faced with spiritual decrees, with decrees against the Torah, therefore the Jewish people are more than willing to sacrifice themselves for this. So therefore, when the tactic of the nations of the world is to make decrees against the Torah, Jacob was successful. What happened? Where was there a downfall? Why was there a little bit lacking in Jacob? If Jacob is injured, something is a little bit, 0.0 point something percent, there's a lack. There's something missing in Jacob. And you know when that happened? Listen to these words, amazing, prophetic. Alot HaShachar means the first light. When the first light hit, all of a sudden there was a weakening in the defense, Jacob's defense, and then he was hit. What does this mean? He says that when the nations of the world see that by making various decrees against the Jewish people, against the Torah, against commandments, they were not successful. So there will come a time when it will be the first light, when you could start. Light is, in his words, is a smile, is relations. Oh, I could see now. I could see what's going on outside. I could see people. So this means when the dawn hit, it was no longer dark. There were no longer decrees. The nations of the world understood that in order for us to defeat the Jewish people, we have to begin a new tactic. And the tactic is the smile. The tactic is money. The tactic is relations, is love, is putting your hand around the other person's shoulder. That is the way to defeat. And therefore, Jacob, when he was faced with this new light, with this new tactic of acceptance, he stumbled a little bit and he was affected. And of all areas that were affected were the place of the circumcision, because this represents relations. That part of the body, okay, more than any other part, represents a connection, a relation with the outside. And that was the beginning of the fall of the Jewish people. And that represented the angel of Esav understood that when that first light hit and Jacob saw a different enemy standing in front of him, it didn't look like the enemy that he was used to. It looked like a friend. It looked like somebody that was coming to join us, to come together with us, to assimilate with us. That took him by surprise. And that took him, when he was surprised, he was affected. They affected the area. They understood that by relations, that's how we are going to defeat the Jewish people. Listen to this, amazing. This connection that the angel understood, that the way to defeat the Jewish people is through relations, which is represented by the place of circumcision, which is represented by the first light of day. Listen to this. Rav Avigdor Nebenzahl, he's the rabbi of the old city. He comes up with a tremendous Torah here. I mean, hold on to your seats. He says, you know, if you want to see, I'll hold it. I'm glad you held on to that seat, Lee. You keep on holding on to that seat. Folks, open up your hearts. This is an amazing Rav Nebenzahl. He must have received prophecy here. I don't see any way that he could have done this. Listen to what he says. You know where it's hinted in the Torah, all 4 fasts that are connected to the destruction of the temple. First fast is when the city of Jerusalem was under siege for almost 3 years by the Babylonians. The second fast is when the when the Jerusalem walls, the outer walls were breached. That was the second fast, which is connected to the fall of Jerusalem and fall of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. The third was when the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. So we have the third fast. The fourth fast is when the Jewish people were given a chance to return to the land of Israel, and they were under the auspices of a man, of a righteous Jew named Gedaliah ben Achikam. He was murdered, assassinated by another Jew on the third day of Tishrei. So there are 4 fasts that out of 6 fasts that we have during the year, 4 fasts, 4 out of 6 are connected to the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Listen to this. Where is it hinted in all of the Torah? Where is this hinted? And Rav Nebenzahl says it is hidden. It is alluded in the following verse that we just read, that because of the fact that Jacob was injured in the area of the thigh, inner thigh, the Jewish people are not allowed to eat a certain part of the animal, which is the vein that runs through the leg. Listen to this. It says, Et Gid Hanasheh. We are not allowed, because Jacob was injured in this area, we are not allowed to eat a certain part of an animal to remember this event. And he says, look at the words, et, Aleph Taf. What is that? Which fast is that alluding to? Aleph Taf is Tisha Av, the 9th day of Av, when the temple was destroyed. Next, Gid. How much? What's the numerical value of the word Gid? 17. 3, 10, 4. 17. Gid. That is alluding to the 17th day, the fast of the 17th day of Tammuz, when the walls of Jerusalem were breached. Next, look at the word Gid. You have Gimel. Gimel is the 3rd day of Tishrei. That is alluding to the fast of the 3rd day of Tishrei when Gedaliah, the son of Achikam, was assassinated. The next letter in Gid is the Yud. Yud. The Yud is for the 10th day of the 10th month, which was yesterday, 10th day of Av, 10th day of Tevet. There we go. So an amazing thing, folks. The downfall, if you're looking to understand the downfall of the Jewish people, of Jerusalem, of the temple, so Rav Nebenzahl spells it out. He spells it out. This is the downfall, which is represented by the angel who injured Jacob in a certain area at a certain time of the day. This was our downfall. When the Jewish people are separate, when the Jewish people separate themselves from the nations of the world in order to uplift the world. Not that we forgot the world, but in order to be that special people, we must be in our own land, on our own turf, our own soil, separated. This will have a tremendous blessing also for the nations of the world. But not what brings us to the destruction, as Rav Nebenzahl was able to prophetically understand over here, is that it is relations. which represents that part of the body. Relations with the non-Jews. Rav Gedalia Sher, he sums it up beautifully. Listen to this. Sums it up. The foundation, I'm translating, this is in his book Or Gedalia, page 109. Amazing. I mean, if you get your hands on the book, copy it. The foundation of the wars of the Jewish people, what's below the foundation? What is the foundation of these wars? The foundations are to make the Jewish people separate. Badad. And this was the idea. This was the idea that he brings down. This was the fight, the first fight between Jacob and the angel of Esav. We spoke about many times how the battle between Jacob and Esav was a battle that sometimes Esav would come against Jacob via war and decrees and cruelty. But there's also a battle plan that Esav had against his brother to show love. And both of them are two sides of the same coin. Sometimes the Gentiles come with love and together and money and influence and smiles, the first light of dawn. Sometimes they come with force. And this was the idea behind the battle between the angel of Esav and Jacob. Because the Torah uses a very interesting word, Vaye'avek. So the Torah says Vayavek means to fight. That we're familiar. When the Gentiles come to fight, Jews usually don't have a problem. But our sages tell us, don't read the word Vaye'avek, ela Vayichabek. Change one letter around. You could read it as to embrace. That's what was going on. The angel came with two different tactics. One was Vayavek, to fight, to have war against decrees. And the other one was Vayichabek, was to embrace and to smile and to show we come with love for the Jewish people. It's two sides of the same battle. And therefore, listen to the words of Rav Sher. This battle is for all generations to make sure that the Jewish people remain separate, as it written in the Torah, in the book Numbers. It says that the Jewish people are a nation that dwells alone. And if, God forbid, the Jewish people do not remain separate from the nations that want to encompass us and embrace us and have relations with us, then the way that God works is that the nations will further distance themselves from us by their hate, by their decrees. It's an amazing concept. The Jewish people, they're supposed to be so smart. Some people think that the reason the Jews are so successful is because they have a higher IQ. I've heard this baloney before. There are a lot of stupid Jews out there. So the idea is that Hashem tells them, listen, you think you're so smart? You think that by having relations with the nations of the world, you are going to find favor in their eyes? Exactly the opposite. If you keep alone, if you keep separate, if you do your job, keep away, then they will find favor you will find favor in their eyes. But if you try to embrace them, if you go for this, if you're a sucker and you fall for it, then God will make sure that the Jewish people in the end of the day will still be alone. We have no choice. We'll be alone standing strong, or we'll be alone where we messed up big time, that we tried to embrace the nations of the world, and then God has it that the love of the nations all of a sudden becomes hatred and decrees against the Jewish people, the Jewish body. It's an amazing thing. There's a famous Rav Chaim Volozhin. He had a great line that if the Jewish people do not make Kiddush, it's something that we make the benediction, sanctification of the wine on Friday nights. If the Jew does not make Kiddush, Kiddush means holiness. Holiness, as Rashi tells us, is separate, is to make yourself separate. If the Jewish people do not separate themselves from the nations, then the nations will make Havdalah. That's how we end the Sabbath, with the candle and the wine once again. The Gentiles will make sure, if we do not separate from them, they will make sure to separate from us by decreeing or by killing us, by having various decrees against any contact with us. That's a famous Rav Chaim Volozhin. And therefore, he works out, he ends that in the end of days, listen to the words of Rav Sher, in the end of days, when we come before the coming of the Messiah, this will be a tremendous test for the Jewish people. If we will remain separate from the nations, that will be the final test. As we see today, we see even good Jews. We see, Jews that have, good intentions. And we see them falling one after another. Organizations falling for this, for money and for embrace. This is the battle. The Gentiles, they have a two-form battle. One is force, one is the sword, or accept our religion. And when they see that it's not successful, they go for the coming close. They go for the relations. God willing, part number 3. Don't go anywhere next week.